Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started here. So thank you everybody for attending. My name is Eric Bowman, and I'm an integration implementation specialist here at Procore, based out of our Portland, Oregon office location. Today we're going to be going over the integration between Procore and Sage 300 construction and real estate. Now, before we start our session, I always like to provide a little background on myself. As I mentioned, I work for Procore now, and I have for about 4.5 years in my current role as an integration implementation specialist. And in my role here at Procore, I work with customers who've purchased the integration between Procore and Sage 300 CRE. My responsibilities include implementation, training, and support. There's a group of us here in the Portland office that make up the ERP integration team, and multiple other coworkers who fill the same role for customers who are getting up and running with this integration. As I mentioned, today we're here to discuss the integration between Procore and Sage, so I like to start with an agenda. So the first thing I'll do is give a brief introduction to what Procore is in case there's anyone here who's unfamiliar with our product and what we do. And then we'll talk a little bit about why Procore created an integration with the Sage construction products. From there, I'll talk a little bit about the partnerships that have been made to make the integration with both Sage 300 CRE and Sage 100 Contractor possible. And then we'll get into the product itself. We'll start with a high-level look at the feature sets included with the integration. And then once we're kind of have a good idea of what is involved in the integration, we'll close out of the PowerPoint presentation here. I'll go into a live Procore instance where the integration is live, and I'll demonstrate a few of the features of the integration so you can get an idea of the look and feel of how this all functions. Finally, I'll provide a little insight into some of the features that are currently being worked on for the integration so you have an idea of how the feature set maps that we'll have looked at earlier will be evolving over time. So, what is Procore? Now, I'm guessing most of you are already at least a little familiar with what Procore is, but in case anyone is not, I wanted to provide just a quick description of what Procore is. So Procore is a leading provider of cloud-based applications for the construction industry. Procore connects people, applications, and devices through our unified cloud-based platform, helping construction professionals manage risk, build quality projects safely, on time, and within their budgets. We have a diversified business model with products for project management, construction financials, quality safety, and field productivity. Simply put, Procore is the #1 most widely used construction management software, and it is used to manage billions of dollars in annual construction volume every year. One thing I really like to highlight when I talk about what Procore is, and especially in terms of integrations, is that we are very unique in that we have an open API. And what this means is that anyone who wants to, whether it's an individual person or a company, anyone that wants to build an integration with Procore is able to. So there's an extensive app marketplace available right out of the box with Procore that you're able to access. That you access all of these custom integrations that all sorts of different companies have created. And this app marketplace is available online. You can view information and details on each of the applications that are available to integrate with our system. Now, in addition to these third-party integrations, Procore has identified some key integrations to create and support on our own. And specifically pertinent to this session, those that involve integrations with key accounting systems, such as Sage's construction products, so Sage 300 CRE and Sage 100 Contractor. So what benefits does integrating with Sage provide, and why is it that Procore decided that these were key and to build ourselves? Well, first and foremost, our integration is going to allow you to use Procore and all of its cloud-based construction management tools and features while integrating with your Sage 300 CRE ERP system for the financial and accounting aspects. And the idea here is that by having these two systems linked, we're going to save time and labor by streamlining the processes of some of the more time-sensitive tasks, such as getting commitments and change orders from the field into your accounting system so payments can be made and processed. Our customers using our accounting integrations tell us all the time that with an integrated system, they've also seen a big reduction in human error, as we've eliminated the need for manual or double entry when transferring data from between two systems. So we're going to talk about the different features included with the integration in just a moment. But in the areas that are integrated, the idea is that you'll be able to enter information in either Procore or Sage and have it sync to the other place without any kind of double entry. So some areas that are key in this discussion, things like estimates, commitments, cost information, will no longer have to be tracked and maintained in two separate places. We're going to be syncing that data between the two systems. Ultimately, this integration is designed to create a more efficient communication channel between the accounting and operational teams at your business. Once Procore and Sage are synchronized, a lot of that valuable accounting information that's being entered every day in Sage is going to sync into the Procore platform, giving project managers and other field staff more visibility into things like job to date cost, aiding them in doing their forecasting and cost to complete calculations, which ultimately is giving people information in a more timely manner and effectively helping to make good decisions while out on the job site. So partnerships are what make this integration possible. In 2015, Procore partnered with hh2, who many of you may already know as they've been a development partner with Sage for many years, to build the initial feature set for our Sage 300 CRE integration. Initially, we were focused on cost management, so the ability to import and export budgets and commitment data, display of actual costs entered in Sage and Procore in nearly real time. So this is kind of the initial set of the features that you would have seen back in 2015 for the integration. Now, hh2 plays a key role in this integration. They're essentially the middleware or the engine, if you will, that's used to make the integration with either Sage CRE with Sage CRE possible, which is what I'm trying to illustrate with the diagram that I have over on the right side of the slide here. Essentially, hh2 sits in the middle of this, and they facilitate the flow of data between Procore and Sage. Customers who purchase the integration are provided with a license for hh2, and our team of implementation specialists at Procore, like myself, are going to be assisting customers installing, configuring hh2 for use with Procore, and then supporting it from that point on. If you happen to already be an hh2 customer, we can often piggyback off of the existing hh2 license for use with our Procore integration as well. While we are partnered with hh2 in this aspect, our solution is fully supported by our team here at Procore, our ERP integrations team. And this does include any issues customers encounter with the integration, hh2 or otherwise. So main point there is that even though we're partnered with hh2, we do support the solution from beginning to end. So while we may have times where we pull hh2 into discussions, it's not going to be a roundabout pointing fingers at each other. We're very much partnered in this whole thing. More recently, at our recent Groundbreak conference, which isn't so recent anymore, but in 2018, we held our Groundbreak conference in Austin. There was an official partnership with Sage announced. While we were able to build a pretty solid integration for Sage with the help of hh2, there were definitely many features we and our customers really wanted to see added to the feature set that frankly were not possible without an actual partnership with Sage. So this was definitely a very exciting announcement and has led to some of the most significant improvements we've been able to make with the Sage 300 CRE integration, specifically providing an integration with the prime contracts and prime contract change order tools in Procore. It's also what allowed us to build an integration with Sage's other construction vertical, Sage 100 Contractor, which was not available prior to this. I haven't gone and done any research super recently, but the last time I looked, we had implemented nearly 400 Sage 100 contractor customers, with very many more in the process of either purchasing or in implementation at the time. And we're getting close to 1,000 for Sage 300 CRE, the customer count being much higher on that, not surprising due to the fact that it's been in the market much longer. So quite a few Sage customers already using our integration and more being added all the time. All right, so let's talk about the features that we're currently seeing with the Sage 300 CRE integration. As I start going through this diagram, you're going to see in many cases that our integration is bidirectional, meaning not only are we able to push information from Procore to Sage, but in many cases, we're also able to pull information from Sage into Procore. With this, we've tried to provide this bidirectional integration in as many places as possible. So it's going to allow customers to continue using existing workflows or make decisions on which workflow makes the most sense for their business. For example, projects. Projects can be created in Procore, and then once created in Procore, they can be exported or pushed to Sage. But you'll see that this has a bidirectional arrow here pointing the other direction as well. So we can also take a project or a job, as it's known on the Sage side, and import or pull it into Procore. So this means you have a decision to make at the time of implementation is where you're going to create your new projects. Where you can either create them in Procore and then simply export the project information from Procore to Sage when you're ready for it to exist in the Sage side. But there may be already a workflow that you're following in Sage that you prefer to keep, and you can continue to do so. Once the job is set up in Sage, click a button to import the project into Procore, and now you have a synced project in the two systems that you can use going forward. So just one of the areas that we've done this bidirectional integration on, and we try to do it, like I said, is everywhere we can, just to be flexible, so that there's not anything enforcing a workflow or making drastic changes to workflows that you may already have. Our integration is tight, meaning not only when, are we pushing or pulling information from and to Sage, as I was just describing, we're also adding a layer of data validation and error checking anytime information is going to be sent from Procore to Sage. Some examples of that, we're able to verify things like job numbers, vendor IDs, commitment IDs, anytime one of those items is going to be exported from Procore to Sage. If a value is entered at the time of export, say a job number that's already in use in Sage, we can see that and we'll actually provide an error on screen to let you know that another value is needed before the information can be exported successfully. We also validate every export, meaning that we can determine in Procore if the information was successfully inserted into Sage on any time you attempt an export between the two systems, between Procore and Sage. If we detect that the export was successful, you'll actually see it on screen in Procore and I'll show this during the demonstration. And if it's not, we'll actually be able to tell that too, and we'll indicate it was unsuccessful right in Procore as well, basically letting you know that the export was either successful or it's failed, so that you aren't having to confirm this manually every time. Like I said, you'll see this in action in just a few minutes, but it's one of my favorite parts of the integration is that we do actually validate when something has been exported that it does actually exist in the other system before letting you know it was successful. Speaking of jobs, we not only integrate with job records in Sage, but we're also able to integrate with sub-jobs as they're known in Procore, or extras as they're known in Sage. And just like projects, we're not only able to import extras from Sage into Procore to create a sub-job on this side, we can do it the other way as well, where a sub-job can be created in Procore, and then we can export them to Sage where it would create the extra underneath the job on that side. Working our way down the feature set map, we can create a company in Procore. Procore has a company directory where you can store users and companies. So any company that's created in Procore can be exported to Sage to create a new vendor record on the Sage side. And again, we have a bidirectional integration here, indicated by the double-sided arrow on the diagram. So alternatively, any vendor record that exists in the Sage AP module can be easily added into the Procore company directory with a click of a button. We actually even have a mechanism for vendors that allows you to link a company, say that's created in Procore, to a vendor that's already set up on the Sage side. So that way you can tie things together that may have been created in both systems. Once a vendor is synced between Procore and Sage, if you happen to be tracking insurance for that vendor in Sage on the vendor setup, that information will sync into Procore and the company directory as well. And when changes are made to that information in Sage, it will automatically update the information in Procore. So that's kind of an optional integration feature for those of you who are tracking vendor level insurance in Sage and want that to be visible on the Procore side. Once the vendor records are linked to company records in Procore, you can use those companies in Procore to issue commitments, so your purchase orders and your subcontracts, and those commitments can be then exported to Sage. Now you may notice this is one of the items that does not show the arrow going the other way. We do currently only support commitments being pushed from Procore to Sage. However, our implementation team may be able to assist you with some data conversion tools we have during implementation if you happen to need have the need for a project that may already have commitments in Sage to be synced up between the two systems. So in other words, we're able to do a data conversion to sync in existing records so that going forward, any new commitments or commitment change orders for that matter can be entered in Procore and exported to Sage using the integration. Once the commitment records are synced up, one of our newest features of the integration is the ability to then issue invoices in Procore, so subcontractor invoices or requisitions, whatever term you prefer. Once those have been entered in Procore, those can actually now be exported directly to the Sage Accounts Payable module. So that was a feature released just over the summer And we're starting to get quite a bit of usage out of that, basically cutting down on some double entry for the invoicing aspect of a project. Moving back up a little bit, you'll notice I skipped a big section in the middle there for budgets, or as they're known on the Sage side, estimates. Another area where we have this bidirectional integration. Maybe you've already got an estimating software that integrates or pushes information for estimates into Sage, such as the Sage estimating product. Can absolutely continue to follow the normal workflow you use for that. As soon as that estimate has been posted for the job and job cost in Sage, it can be pulled into Procore with the click of a button. Now, Procore also has a budget tool that allows data entry as well. You can enter directly into it, or you can import from a CSV. If you're preferring that as the point of entry for the budget, once the budget's been entered in Procore, it can be exported to populate the estimate on the Sage side. And this is actually a workflow that I plan to be showing you in just a few minutes during the demonstration. Once the budget's populated in Procore, whether it came from Sage or it was entered in Procore directly, any budget modifications that are entered in Procore in the budget tool can be exported back to Sage, where it's going to create an approved estimate change transaction. So it's going to affect the approved estimate changes and revised estimate amounts on the job cost side of things when we export those. And we can also, another optional aspect of the integration here is we can also include the updated forecast to complete and estimated cost at complete information that's being tracked in the Procore budget to send that to Sage anytime a budget's exported as well. This updates miscellaneous worksheet transactions in Sage so that they can be included on reports on that side. This is another one of the newer features of the integration. You can see that was released this year as well. Moving our way down here, we are now onto the revenue side of the integration with Sage, which again was, as I mentioned earlier, made possible by partnering with Sage in 2018. Specifically, this means you have the option to import a prime contract entered in Sage into Procore for any synced project. We're able to import contracts entered through the Sage Contracts application, as well as those that have been recorded through job cost under the enter miscellaneous worksheets task. And once that prime contract has been synced, you'll then have the option to export any approved prime contract change orders from Procore to Sage. When a change order, a prime contract change order is exported, you'll notice on the right side here, it does create both the approved estimate and approved scheduled value change transactions on the Sage side. So your job cost reports and your Sage billings, if you happen to be billing out of contracts and billing, will all include that information. And then finally, one of the most powerful features included in the integration is the wealth of cost data that you're able to pull from Sage into Procore, providing real-time budget and cost data to project managers and other operational staff who happen to be using the Procore budget and financial tools. By default, this information is pulled directly from the categories and records in Sage and is displayed in the budget, as well as on some reports that we've included with the integration. But as you can see on the right side here, there's actually a couple of other options as well. We have a couple of the newer features that we've built in to pull detailed cost transactions. So rather than the category totals, we're actually able to pull transactions directly from the current.jct file into Procore. And even newer than that is for customers who happen to be using the billing module to generate work in progress or generate WIP. We can actually designate which cost types should display the WIP amount and which should show the actual costs, giving you much more flexibility in how cost information is displayed in Procore. Meaning we can show actual cost, summary, actual cost detail, marked up WIP amounts, or a combination. So I'll show an example of the summary amounts versus the detailed cost transaction syncing during the demo in just a moment to give you more of a visual on how that information is displayed. So to wrap this up, the features you see here are what are included with the Procore and Sage 300 CRE integration as it stands today. But I do want you to know that we're not done. We've been continuing, as you can see from this slide, to make some pretty major releases just this year. And we've got some ideas and some projects in place currently that are going to enhance this integration even more. I will be sharing with you a couple of the features that were in that are in progress currently that we hope to be adding to the integration in the near future when we get through with the demonstration portion of the session here today. But for now, go ahead and leave the PowerPoint here for a moment and go into a live demonstration of the integration. So here I am in a live Procore demo environment. We use this site for training. This is synced with Sage 300 CRE company folder, and I'll be showing the database that's tied to here as a part of the demonstration here as well. So if this is your first time seeing Procore, I'm on the project portfolio tab here, which is basically the main landing page when you first get into your site. And as you can imagine, project portfolio lists a bunch of jobs. Now you'll notice that most of my jobs down the left-hand side of this page have a green banner on them. That green banner is in the name column there. And that's basically a visual to let you know which projects are actually synced with a job in Sage and which ones are not. So you can see most of my projects are synced, but I do have a couple that I've set up in Procore that I have not yet sent to Sage yet. Now I've got a project set up for this demonstration here specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one up here. This project, bear with me just a moment here. All right, let's try that again here. So I've got a project that I've got set up for the demonstration here. And you'll notice that this project has the green banner on it. Like I mentioned, it's been synced with Sage. I was able to create it in Procore and export it to Sage. So the green banner is listed right there. Because this project is synced with Sage, we're able to start using the financial tools, and I'm going to start with the budget. So under project tools here, I'll go into the budget screen. So this project, it may look like there's a budget here, but you'll notice there's no amounts. What's actually happening here is I've already incurred some cost on this on the Sage side. So everywhere I've actually incurred some cost here is kind of holding a placeholder. But we'll want to go ahead and get the original budget into the project. Now you'll remember when I was talking about the feature set a few minutes ago that I mentioned the budget works bidirectionally, meaning we have options of either entering it in Procore and exporting it to Sage where it would appear in job cost as the original estimate. Or if the estimate's already been input on the Sage side, it could be imported in from Sage, which would create the budget we're looking at right now. For the sake of this demonstration, we're going to use Procore as the point of entry. So in Procore, we can do it one of two ways. We can enter the budget manually using the Create Budget line item button here up at the top. So I could click the button here, and then it allows me to pick any of my Sage standard cost codes that I've added to the project here, cost type, and then of course enter in my values. So very similar to data entry that you might be used to on the job cost side of things. Of course, just different interface. So we could do that line by line and populate the budget. But we also have the option on the right here to do an import. And the import template can be downloaded right from here. I've already created this import file for this project, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose it. Just a CSV file, click open, and I'll import it. And this is going to go ahead and populate the budget based on the import file that I put together for the project. So pretty simple budget here, 19 line items on it. You can see all my amounts have populated in here now. If anybody's curious, I can pull the template up real quick just to kind of give you a visual of what it looks like. It's a very simple CSV file. It's coming up in Excel here right now. So basically cost code, cost type, and then either amounts, or if you want unit quantity, unit cost. So I had filled that out before and put this all in, but really simple process of getting a budget imported in from a CSV here. So now I've got the budget in Procore. The next step would be, let's get it exported to Sage, assuming that it's complete. So to do that, I would lock it. And our next step here is to click this Send to ERP button. The Send to ERP button is going to exist on any record that can be exported from Procore to Sage. And it's essentially the button used to hand things off between operations and accounting. By clicking this button, I've effectively let my accounting team know that this is ready to be exported to Sage. So I'll go ahead and click it now. If I click this too early, let's say I realize, oops, no, there's some changes I need to make to this before it gets exported to Sage, I do have the opportunity to review or retrieve it while it's in this state of waiting for an accounting approver. Now I want to be clear here that when I click send to ERP, this is not actually exporting anything to Sage yet. What this is doing is simply placing it in a queue, in this case of budgets that are ready to be reviewed. And from there, they can either be accepted and exported to Sage, or they can be rejected if the person doing the review notices something that's wrong. The act of reviewing and either exporting information to Sage or rejecting it for correction is performed by specific users who've been given and granted specific access in Procore to do so. We refer to this role on our side as an accounting approver. The idea here is that nothing will affect Sage until an accounting approver has confirmed the information is complete and accurate and used the option to export the information out of Procore to Sage. So there's always going to be someone there, kind of a gatekeeper, if you will, to verify that information is accurate before anything is changed in Sage. Now we're going to look at that process in just a few minutes. But before we do that, let's queue something else up that needs to be exported to Sage. We'll do a commitment. So I'm going to go under Project Tools, and now instead of in the budget, I'm going to go into the Commitments tool here. Now from this screen here, I would see if there's any commitments already entered for the project, but in this case, it's my first one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Create here, and I'll create a subcontract. Now, I'm going to go through this part fairly quickly, not going through each field, but mostly just the areas that we kind of tie into the Sage integration. But the first thing here is I need to start my commitment number. So my job number is 20004, and this is commitment number 001. By setting that is the example here, I've now set the stage for all my commitments that are going to be entered on this project going forward. So well, we'll have to manually enter the number on the first one. From this point on, the system will automatically increment these if that happens to align with your numbering system. So the next commitment I enter would be 20004-002 and so on. So in other words, the system will pick up on your numbering scheme based on what you've done for the first one. Now I'm going to enter an electrical subcontract here. So I've got a title here of electrical subcontract. And then the next step here is to pick the company. This is showing me any company that's been added to my Procore company directory. Now you'll notice that one of them here says ERP linked and the other ones do not. If I pick this first one, A1 Electric, that's ERP linked, it's actually showing me the Sage ID number that this vendor or this that the company in Procore A1 Electric is linked to. I can write a commitment to any company I want to, but the only ones we'll be able to export are for the vendors that are linked. So this is kind of a nice visual to show the person who's entering the commitment, the company they are entering, if it's linked up to the vendor in Sage as expected. If not, that's certainly something we can address and get fixed. But at this point, I'll go ahead and pick my linked vendor. And I'm going to kind of skip over the rest of this. I think it's all pretty straightforward. You got a description, you got a retainage field, you can add any attachments, contract dates, inclusions, exclusions. What I really want to get to here is to the SOV. So I'm going to click on Create and enter SOV here. And here's where I'm going to be putting in the line items. So I'll click Add Line, and I'm able to pick any of the cost codes that have been set up for the project. I'm going to use my electrical subcontract code here, and I'll put in a description, electrical sub, and my dollar amount. So I'll use the dollar amount here of $20,000. And now I can go ahead and save it. And similar to the budget, at this point, if we're ready to get this to Sage, then my next step here is going to be to send this to ERP, which you can see the buttons here, but this one's grayed out. And the reason it's grayed out is because this commitment doesn't meet the criteria to be exported yet at this point. You'll notice if I hover over it here, it's indicating that this commitment has a status that is not approved. We can only export or send the commitment to ERP, so it can be exported rather once it has an approved status. So if it should be marked approved at this point, I'd go ahead and edit it, choose approved, and hit save. And if that is the only reason I wasn't able to send it to ERP, which in this case, that is the case, my button is now available. So one of the kind of neat tricks or tips about Procore, anytime a button's not available, you can kind of hover over it and it'll let you know why that's not available. So kind of similar, I'm not able to delete it anymore because it's approved. So if I wanted to delete it, I would edit it and then I'd be able to change the status and then I could delete it. In this case though, we'll go ahead and send it to ERP. We're ready to go ahead and get this thing exported to Sage. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it's now going to be in my accounting approvers court. who again will have the opportunity to review and decide if this should be exported or if it should be rejected. Now you'll notice that as soon as I hit that send to ERP button on this one, we got a blue banner here in the header of the commitment. This is just a visual for the user that's managing the commitments on the project, letting them know that they have sent it to the accounting team for review. If the accounting team decides to export it to Sage, we'd actually see this banner update and it would turn green when that process is complete. And if the accounting approvers happen to reject it, then it would turn yellow. And so it's kind of just a way to provide some color coding here so that it's easy for the person managing this in Procore to quickly identify which commitments are synced, which ones have not yet been exported to Sage. And you would see that same color coding system used on commitment change orders and prime contract change orders as well. So, hopefully this is a good, kind of feel of how the financial tools on the Procore side work from the operational standpoint. So now we're going to switch hats a little bit and look at how this information actually gets exported to Sage. So I'm going to back up to where we started this demonstration now to the company level here in Procore. And under company tools, we have this area here called ERP integrations. This is where we can go view anything that's being going to be either pulled into Procore from Sage or vice versa. From here, I'm going to be demonstrating the role of an accounting approver, and I'll actually show you how we can now export the budget and commitment that were sent to ERP during the first part of the demonstration. Now, each user that's set up in Procore with the role of an accounting approver is automatically signed up to receive daily digest emails. So before I actually show you the ERP tab in here, I do want to show you an example of that email. Looks something like this. Each evening, what we're going to do is go through your Procore site and determine if there's anything in a state that's waiting to be reviewed by an accounting approver. And anything that happens to be sitting there will be included in this digest so that it's waiting for you in your inbox first thing the following morning. So in this example digest, we have a commitment, we have a commitment change order, we've got some vendors, we got some budgets, got a job, and some prime contract change orders, and even invoice that's ready for review by an accounting approver. So the idea is that these links here would take you into the location in Procore where you'd be able to review that information. Now, we don't have to wait for the digest. We can review and accept or reject things at any point, and that's where we'll do what we'll do right now by going under the company tools to our ERP integrations tab here. And I'll start with the first thing that we sent to ERP in the demonstration here, which is the budget. The screen we're looking at here is the ready to import filter. So if I had entered my estimate in Sage and wanted to add it to Procore, I would do that using the import button here. So, for example, on my OHSU lighting renovation project, if that was the complete estimate, import, and now I have a budget that pulled into Procore from Sage. But in our example, we entered the estimate or budget in Procore, and it's now queued up waiting to ready to export here, right here. And that's because we entered it in Procore and then sent it to ERP. So again, these are going to remain here, the ones that are sitting here, until an accounting approver takes action. And they'll continue to show up on that digest email I just showed you as well until that's been done. From this screen, the accounting approver can review the information, and if needed, they can even go into the item that they're reviewing to review it in detail. So for example, I could use this link right here, open it up in, say, another browser tab, and I'm now in the budget screen in Procore where that budget was entered, where I can view the full details of what was entered, all the cost codes and cost types that are going to be affected by estimate amounts in this budget amount column right here. If we go back to the ready to export here, the act of approving or rejecting is pretty simple. If everything looks okay, I hit accept and I click export to Sage. But maybe I noticed that there was a wrong cost code used or something along those lines. I can go ahead and hit the reject option here, which opens up a text box, explain the problem, wrong cost codes used, or whatever it happens to be, and I can hit reject. If I happen to reject this, the person who sent this to ERP is going to receive a notification by email letting them know that it was rejected, and any comments that we've entered in here are going to be provided there as well. So, kind of the idea is let the person know what's wrong so they can fix it. They can make those changes and then send it back, and hopefully at that point it looks okay. So now we can go ahead and accept it and export it to Sage. I'm going to go ahead and start that process now. You'll see here that the budget is now exporting to Sage as I'm speaking. When it's done And assuming it's successful, the budget will move out of the ready to export filter into our synced filter on the top right up here. If we happen to leave this screen open during the entire process, which sometimes takes 3 to 5, 7 minutes, somewhere along those lines, once it is successful, it would update on this screen, but the next time you update the page, it would then no longer be listed, and it would be listed in the sync filter. If we do not detect that it was exported successfully, then what happens is the opposite of that. It would indicate here that it was failed, and you'll notice we also have a failed filter here on the right as well. So as I mentioned, early on in the session here today, we call our integration tight for this reason, meaning that we can actually tell if it made it or not. So it's, while we don't ever want anything to fail, obviously, one of the features I appreciate the most about this integration is that not only are we able to actually push this data down, we can detect whether it made it or not, so that we can tell you if you have a problem or not. And you can actually see in this case, this was finished and it successfully exported as I was talking there. So if I go ahead and refresh this page now, you're going to see one less on my ready to export and one more in my synced filter. So we'll go take a look at that in Sage in just a minute. But before we do, we have a commitment that needs to be exported as well. And I bet you can guess what tab that's on, the commitments tab. So here on commitments, you'll remember, if you remember from the demonstration, commitments is a one-way street, Procore to Sage only. So we don't have an import option here, but we do have our ready to export filter. And right here, we have the commitment that is waiting to be exported to Sage that I just entered a moment ago. Not a whole lot more to say here other than you do see a little bit more information. You've got a link to the commitment here. So again, if we wanted to view it in detail, we could pull it open here. And now we're in that commitment, again, where we saw that blue banner because it's still in the state waiting to be reviewed and either rejected or accepted. We have information about the commitment number, the vendor, and the SOV items that were entered. But essentially, we're at the same kind of decision point here. Either we reject it and enter a comment, or we accept it and go ahead and export it to Sage. Here is the commitment ID number that's going to be sent to Sage. So we'll go ahead and start that process as well. Now, while we wait for that process to complete, let's go take a look at the budget that we just exported. I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh on the page here. Now that that budget's been successfully exported to Sage, you will see a little change in the budget screen here. It indicates here up at the top that we are now synced with Sage on this budget, and it'll start letting you know as it's detecting cost changes. So, it's a little bit of a, I guess, spoiler alert or behind the scenes talk here. I had to update some costs in Sage just before the session today, so that's why it tells me it was an hour ago that it last detected costs. But let's say we posted some payroll in the middle of this, or we entered some AP invoices. Those are going to be detected automatically from this point on, and as soon as they're detected, this timer updates. So say I go post some AP, and within 15, 20 minutes, we would see this thing update and tell us that it detected costs a minute ago. Basically just trying to say there that this is all going to update automatically for you going forward, and it lets you know the last time we detected changes here. Now, you may recall when I was talking about costs on that feature set diagram at the during the just a few minutes ago, I mentioned there's multiple ways to sync and display the cost data that we're looking at here. So what we're looking at right now is kind of the summary view where we don't have necessarily the detailed cost information. And so what I mean by that, if I scroll over, the costs that are syncing in from Sage are coming into these two columns here. We have your job to date costs here and direct costs here. The difference between those being job to date costs are all costs, where direct costs are only costs that are outside of any kind of commitment. So if you have an invoice related to a commitment, that would not accumulate in the direct cost, but it would in the job to date costs. But let's take this material line, for example, here. I've got a cost coming in from Sage showing me that there's $2,250. But if I click on it, I'm looking at a summary view right now. That's what I see. It's total cost of $2,250. This is the value that's coming in from the category record in Sage. Now, we also have a more detailed way to view the costs. I've got a different budget view that I'll use here to show you that. So I'll toggle there, and we'll look at that same line. So I've got the same line here, same cost code and category, same amount, but you'll notice when I click on this line, it's actually giving me the transactional detail that makes up that cost. So rather than just a summary total, I now actually can see that this cost of $2,250 is made up of actually 2 different invoices that were entered through Sage Accounts Payable. That happens to be coming in from an AP cost. If it was a labor cost, it might be a payroll posting or set of postings that make up that total. Or we may even have just some costs that were entered as direct costs in the job cost module showing up as general expenses here. So just a way to see more detail other than a summary number, and this is one of our more exciting enhancements that we've released over the last year or so. So I just like to make sure that the difference there. So basically, the idea is that you can decide to have one, the other, or both. With most of our customers, of course, opting to want to see more detail than less. So this has been a pretty exciting enhancement going forward with our integration. So our commitment, just wanted to go back to the ERP tab. You can see that works the same way. It's now successfully exported. If I hit refresh here, only have one left to export. We now have a extra synced one here. And I think now we should go ahead and take a look at it in Sage. So I've got the Sage database that I just exported the budget and the commitment to. So the easier of the 2 entries to look at on the Sage side here would be the commitment. So I'll start there. Tasks, commitments. Hit my list here, and it was 2004001, this guy right here. There is the commitment for my A1 electric company with the schedule of values that I used in Procore. So, basically like it was created in here in Sage, directly, but we pushed it from Procore. And as far as the estimate goes, estimates are typically just a series of transactions in Sage. So, a number of ways we could look at it, but the easiest thing I can think of is just to pull up an inquiry by batch here on the new file. We have our import estimates batch here, and here are the transactions for each of the different items that were in the budget that I exported to Sage. So if we were to go ahead and post those entries, give that a second to process, I could now potentially go look at a report like a job cost report, or any other report that you would run that shows your estimate totals on a job. And what we'll see on that, range on the right job here, we have all of our original estimate amounts that all came in from Procore. We have the costs that are now syncing into Procore. And if I get down to our division 16 here, oh, I still need to post the commitment too. So I forgot we have to post those transactions before those update too. So I should have another batch here for my commitment. Yep, it's right there. Should have just posted everything. We'll run that report again here in just a second. So again, we have all of our estimates. We have those costs that we're now seeing in Procore because our budget is synced. And if I go to the last page here where my division 16 is, there it is. My $20,000 commitment is showing up in the total committed column right there as well. So going forward, we could continue to update costs. Those are all going to sync back to Procore. If I were to enter change orders in Procore, we would push those down and we would show them in the approved changes column. Commitment changes, of course, would be entered in Procore and exported to Sage to update the total committed column. Everything I think that you would expect it to happen here by continuing forward with that project. So, obviously, as we spent more, we spent a lot of time going over our feature set diagram. There's more features included with the integration than just those that I've shown you here today. But hopefully, by just seeing, those ones that we did show, gives you a good feel for the way information can be pulled into Procore, exported from Procore to Sage, and going forward with all the other features, you're going to see similar behavior. So to kind of take this home here, I mentioned that we're continuing to work on this integration. So to conclude, I did want to let you know about a few of the features that we do have currently in development that we're going to be adding to the integration here in the near future. So probably the most recent enhancement we have is the ability to export subcontractor invoices from Procore to Sage. so that they will show up in accounts payable as an unpaid invoice, where you would obviously then be applying payment. The next, kind of big piece or big aspect of that integration that we're going to build on is now, once that payment's been made in Sage, to actually sync that back to Procore to show that the invoice has been paid. So while we currently support the ability to export the invoice to Sage, what we're working on is the ability to then pull the payment back to Procore to show the payment details as well. After that, the next big enhancement that we're expecting to see will be to add the option to export owner or accounts receivable invoices that have been entered in Procore to the Sage AR module. So right now we support, again, the ability to export the subcontractor or the AP invoices entered in Procore to Sage. We're now going to be moving into adding that ability to the AR side. There's, of course, many other smaller items being worked on, but for now, I simply wanted to provide some insight into the bigger items that are being worked on. So thank you all for listening to me talk here now for the last half hour, 45 minutes. Hopefully gives you a good picture of how this integration works, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thanks.